Oh, we're live. No, it's never too big of a smile.
Do we have any viewers? Do I have anything?
Not yet.
Oh, I can pull it up on this. Wait, I can pull it up on this computer so I can actually see it. Yes, that would be better. All I wanted.
Good evening. If you're just joining us, we're going to get started in a few minutes. In the meantime, please download and print the PSAT. The link is on the page. If you were with us on Tuesday, it's the same test, so just make sure you have the math portion printed out. You'll be using that in a little bit. Good evening, everyone. As you're joining us, please make sure that you have the PSAT downloaded and printed. If you were with us Tuesday night, you should already have it. We're going to be using the math portion in just a few minutes. You can see we'll start when the timer gets to 0, and this should give people plenty of time to get the test ready. And then I will introduce you to Eileen, and off you'll go for PSAT math. Super fun. It is fun.
I agree.
If you have questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat as the webinar goes on. So if you have questions, I can let Eileen know what your questions are, or I can answer them, as you ask them as well. So you can chat with me. So you got, as you can see, a few more minutes before we get started. Make sure you've got the test printed out. Go grab your snacks and your drinks, and we'll get started. This goes from 6:30 till 8 p.m. You will get the recording of both Tuesday's session and tonight's session. So if you need to leave early or if you miss anything, you will be able to get that and go back. We are also going to share the answer key to the entire test after the webinar tonight, so you will get that as well. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining us, I'm just going to chime in again. My name's Kathy. I'm with Score at the Top, one of the directors at Score at the Top. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're making sure everybody has time to log on, get the test printed out, and ready to go. If you joined us Tuesday, you should already have this printed out. We'll be going over math tonight, so make sure you have those that section printed out and ready to go.
Forgot my chair had wheels. So pumped. So
We have
pumped.
someone who's really excited about tonight. So I'm pumped too. I got a question. If you're prepared for the PSAT, does that mean you're ready for the SAT as well? Pretty much, yes. The PSAT is a little bit of an easier test than the SAT. There are some differences. There are some fewer questions in the reading, fewer questions in the math, and they do say it's a little bit of an easier test in terms because it's given to sophomores and juniors, not for college acceptance. But the P stands for preliminary SAT. So the strategies that we're going over tonight, the format of the test, everything else is very similar. So if you learn these strategies and practice, you will be more ready for an SAT when you go to take it. Hi again, everyone. I see a lot of familiar names. It's good to see you guys again tonight. Yes, the PSAT should be given October 14th in most of your schools. COVID has messed that up a little. I think some schools went to the weekend, October 17th, but your guidance counselor will let you know, but October 14th should be the main day. If you're just joining us, please make sure you do have the test printed out with the math section ready to go. That's what Eileen's going to be covering tonight. We got a few more minutes. I just want to give you guys a few more minutes to get that printed out before I take that off the screen so it doesn't get in the way of the PowerPoint while Eileen is talking with all of you. And then silence that I feel like I should fill. Oh my God.
No, I'm like awkwardly sitting here.
Who's ready for the weekend? Eileen, we'll talk about this with you at the end of the test, but if you want to finish the test that you have printed out and give one of our centers a call, we can get you set up for a review of what you've gone over this weekend or Monday or Tuesday of next week before you go in for the PSAT on Wednesday. So let us know if you want to do that. We can definitely help you there. We do also offer ACT and SAT simulations that are timed and proctored like official tests, which is a great way to kind of see how you'll do in a test-like environment. Those are complimentary, so if you ever want to sign up for one of those, all you have to do is reach out to one of the centers as well, and we'll get you signed up and get you ready for those. All right, 2 more minutes. Now's the time to take that last potty break or go grab a drink or a snack before we start all the fun. Again, if you didn't hear me before, we do have a chat option. So if you have questions, feel free to put it in there. I will be monitoring the chat while Eileen is teaching you. So we can take care of answer questions live as they come in. I guess we got to give a shout out to Nick. Today's his birthday. So happy birthday. Hope it's a good one.
It's a fun birthday present doing PSAT prep.
It is. It is. I think you've made a wise choice. The gift your parents gave you, PSAT prep. It is a gift. It is a gift.
From our hearts to yours.
All right. One more minute. I can wait 1 more minute.
You're getting antsy. You're getting antsy. Relax.
I am.
Got a whole minute. Make sure your pencils are sharpened. You stretch.
Let me know where you guys go to school. I'm interested to see where everybody's from. This one. All right, I'm over it. I'm going to turn this off. That way we don't get an ad at the end anymore.
40 seconds.
I'm going to turn this over to Eileen. She is going to be your captain for the evening. She's going to be going over. She will briefly cover the similar strategies and the overview of the PSAT that Sheila covered the other night. But since most of you were on the other night, She won't go too deep into those details. You will get the recording of this, so if you want to go back, you can look through all of that. As I said, yeah, we got a lot of kids here. Coral Glades, Dreyfus, Suncoast Gardens. Welcome, welcome everyone. If you have a question that you would like to be answered, feel free to put it in the chat. If I can answer it, I will. If not, I'll interrupt Eileen and she will answer it for you. But without further ado, here is Eileen Kent.
Hello, welcome. So tonight we're going to be going over acing the PSAT. We are broadcasting and recording live from both Facebook and YouTube. If for some reason you have to duck out early or your internet's out or whatever, no panicking. It's being recorded, and like Kathy said, you will be getting the recordings emailed to you from both Tuesday night and tonight. So hopefully you won't have any internet issues. By now you should have downloaded and printed an actual PSAT. We are going to do a timed PSAT mini simulation. So during the simulation, you're going to answer questions from one of the sections from an actual PSAT that was given in the past. And then I will go over question by question with you, all of the answers. If you want to do the remaining questions on your own from the final section, the fourth section, you can. And then if you give Miss Kathy a lovely phone call, you can schedule your session to review it with one of our tutors. If you have not yet downloaded and printed an actual PSAT, it is here at the bottom of this screen before I click off of it. But hopefully by now you have it. I will have the questions up on the screen for each one. I just think it would be easier if you were able to print these out. There's 17 questions, so it is a few pieces of paper. So hopefully you thought ahead and printed. Sheila did our PSAT webinar on Tuesday. She went over reading, writing, and the English. She is amazing. If you missed her webinar, then please watch her recording before your test. That's me. I am going over the math section. I used to teach public school. I now teach at SCORE at the top. I also tutor, and I love math, so that's why I'm doing this tonight. All right, so what you've all been waiting for. What exactly is the PSAT? PSAT is actually a nickname for preliminary SAT. SAT is Scholastic Aptitude Test. It is also going to be where you can take your National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. It's the same test, you just take one test. This is sponsored by the College Board and the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. College Board are the lovely people who also make the regular SAT that you will take to apply for college. So this is an important test and we want you to do well. The reason you should take the PSAT, of course, the obvious reason, prepare for your SAT. This could also help you jumpstart on some of your college planning. You could anticipate some future SAT scores. If you do really awesome on the PSAT, then you regular SAT. If you don't do so awesome, then at least now in 9th or 10th or even 11th grade, this will highlight some of your strengths and weaknesses in your skills. So you'll be able to fill in some gaps ahead of time and know what you need to work on prior to taking the actual SAT, which is the score you're going to need for colleges. And also taking this PSAT, they give you a ton of information from colleges. If you are a junior, only if you're a junior, this will enter you potentially into the National Merit Scholarship competition. And I will explain a little bit more about that in a second. But PSAT compared to SAT, regular SAT. So the PSAT is technically easier because it has a few less questions, making it shorter, and it does not have an essay, which is nice for those of you that don't like to write. Let me show you a little bit of a breakdown. So this is our PSAT. So there are 4 sections. The first section is your reading section, and you will have 60 minutes. So you have 4 passages and one pair passage with 47 questions. Writing and language, you have another 4 passages with 44 questions. Math, you have 13 multiple choice and 4 grid-ins. In your no calculator section, your last section, your math with a calculator, has 27 multiple choice and 4 grid-ins. Now let's look here at the SAT. Boom! We changed everything in red for you, so you didn't have to think too hard on this one. The calculator section gets a little bit longer. The reading section also gets a little bit longer. Notice the number of questions changes in both math sections. They love to hate on us in math. So in the math section, you will bump up to 20 no calculator questions and 38 calculator questions for math, so it will take you a little bit longer. And the level and rigor of the questions is just a tad bit harder because they know that this test, the actual SAT test, is the test that is going to be used for college admissions, okay? A PSAT is not used in college admissions. However, it is an excellent predictor of SAT success. So you do want to take this test. You do want to take it seriously and try your best and do the best that you can so that you can see accurately if you're on track for a good SAT score or if you need to give us a call and start tutoring ASAP so that you can be on track to get a good SAT score. Okay. SAT and ACT, they are comparable. They are the second most important factor in your college admissions process. So when you're applying to colleges, of course, they look at a ton of things, but the second thing that they are going to look at is your SAT and ACT scores. So they are very important. That's why we like to practice. So common scores. I know I've been talking about scores this whole time. You have no idea how we score this. So let me show you a scale. A common score scale for PSAT and SAT is here. So we did PSAT in purple. So the lowest you could get is a 160. The highest you could get is a 760. For the regular SAT, the scale goes from 200 to 800. The reason they're different scales is because there's a different number of questions for each section. So because there are more test questions on SAT, then the score will go up potentially a little bit higher. So ideally on the PSAT, you're looking for 760s. On the SAT, you're looking for 800s within each section. The types of questions that you will get are broken down here. So there's some evidence-based reading and writing, and then there are some math sections that are broken down. They break it further into these cross-test scores and sub-scores. I know that Sheila went way in depth on these for you guys, so I won't reiterate it too much for everybody, but it does break down everything within scales, and they can use these sub-scores for different scoring. Okay, so if you're looking for what is a good score, so I know that I showed you 760 is the highest, 800 on SAT is the highest, but what exactly does that mean? What type of score are you looking at for your school? So I'm just going to pull out a couple, like University of Florida, you would want to get a 1310 to a 1470 overall. So that's with all of your sections together. So the more 800s you get, the easier it is to get up to that 1470 really quickly. The second column here where you see the 33, 30, those numbers are for ACT. The ACT goes up to a perfect 36. So if you're going to MIT, you need to be at that 36. And the scores are usually pretty comparable. If you score about a 1500 on the SAT, you should expect to get about a 33 or 34 on the ACT. So if you've taken an ACT before, you can kind of compare some of the scores to where you want to be at. Here, these are just the Florida's 12 state universities, because I know being in Florida, a lot of us want to stay here or want to use Bright Futures or anything. There are also qualifying scores for those types of scholarships and other scholarships. So again, scores matter. The score that you get, the higher you get, the better off you will be. And looking from just our state universities, anywhere from about a 1080 and to about a 1,500 to go to a Florida State University is where you want to be at. All right, so I did talk about a little bit with the National Merit Scholarship Competition. So in October, 1.5 million juniors are taking this test. That's you guys on October 14th or 17th. You will take this test. Based on your scores from this test in April, they will choose 50,000 that qualify for recognition, meaning top scores, you did awesome, and you rock. Then from those 50,000, they will break it apart into commended students and semifinalists. If you become a semifinalist in February, you will have more testing where you will have become one of 15,000 finalists. And finally, in March, they will announce the 8,400 merit scholarship winners. Hopefully, one of those 8,000 is on here tonight. Yay. All right, so for the national merit selection, remember those sub-scores I had mentioned? So for the national merit, they're going to look at those sub-scores. To figure out whether or not you would qualify, you would take your sub-scores from reading, writing, and math, and those sub-scores range from 8 to 38, and you would add them all up and then double it. And the highest possible index or the highest possible score you could get from that is a 228. Florida National Merit semifinalist, the cutoff for the class of 2021 is a score of 216. So you must be at a 216 or better if you want to be considered for the national merit selection. Okay, now for all the fun reasons why you came. Test taking strategies, yay. Okay, so there are two test taking strategies that I want to start with. The first is our guessing strategy, and then we will talk about our pacing strategy because remember this is a time test. So first, our guessing rule. There is absolutely no penalty for a wrong answer, meaning if you completely Christmas tree this whole thing, they wouldn't know and you wouldn't be marked off for any of your wrong answers. So make sure you bubble every single question. If you're running out of time, you can bubble straight down, but hopefully after we go over pacing, that won't be the issue. But make sure that when you are guessing, you are making an educated guess rather than a wild guess, to give yourself a better opportunity to get the answer right. But it is okay to guess. And if you don't know the answer, you should then make an educated guess. Do not leave any questions blank. There is no penalty. You're not going to lose any points. No one's going to know. They're not going to yell at you. Please bubble something so that you do not leave it. If you leave it blank, you're guaranteed not to get a point. If you bubble something, there's a chance you might get a point. Okay. And the other part is the pacing. So remember, easy questions, they're 1 point. Hard questions, 1 point. Medium questions, 1 point. They're all 1 point. So you're going to want to make sure that when you are doing this, you do first all your easy ones, the ones that are easy for you. In math, they do go in order, which is nice. So if you start at the beginning and you go through all of your questions, then you should be able to finish all of the easy ones for you first, and then you can move on to the medium ones, move on then to the hard ones if you run out of time. Those are the ones that we would rather you guess on rather than guessing on easy ones that you could have got if you had time. Now, with pacing, never ever hang out on one question for too long. If you get stuck on a tough question, move on. It's okay to guess and move on. Go to the next question. The next question might be easier. I know I said they go in order from easy to hard. Maybe for you, this one's harder, but the next question would be easy. But you know, you won't get the chance to get to it if you stick too long on the one question. So if that happens, then you need to do what's called leave a trail, leave a thinking trail. So if you're guessing, just draw a question mark in your test booklet. That's fine. If you know for a fact one of the answers can't be true, cross it out. Use the power of elimination. Whatever you have to do to get through this test, do it. This is your test book. Write all over it. I encourage you to write all over it. The more you write, the more of a trail you leave yourself, the better you'll be. Nobody's going to look at this. They're not going to know whether you did or didn't write. It's only for you. So make sure that you are writing and leaving yourself a trail. Circle the numbers, underline. When we go through the 17 questions together, I will show you where I normally circle numbers or where I underline things to help me break stuff down. Now, once you've gone through the entire test, we call this a two-pass rule. You have to do what's called a two-pass. That means you answer all your questions that you easily can answer first. Then you come back the second time around and you return to those questions with those question marks off to the side or the numbers that you had circled as ones that you weren't totally sure of the first time around. If you still have time, then after you've gone past the two-pass rule, you've answered now all the questions, you've answered the ones, even the ones you had to guess on. Now you can go back and look for careless mistakes and check all of your answers. And I encourage you at that point to go back all the way to question number 1 and go through them all. And again, the only way you're going to have enough time to answer not only all the easy questions, but also go back to all the hard questions and then be able to look for careless mistakes is if you have a good pace. The easiest way to get a good pace is to practice. The more comfortable you are with this test, the more times you do it, the more comfortable you will be with your pace. You don't want to start out sprinting and then run out of breath halfway through the test. You also don't want to start walking and then realize at the end you have to rush. So practicing tonight with us while it's timed or doing one of our simulations is another good way to help yourself figure out what your pace would be so you don't feel like you're sprinting and you don't feel like you're crawling. Okay, the other thing I want to point out is periodically checking your answer sheet to make sure you're marking the correct question. Don't wait until you're all the way done with the test to make sure that you bubbled everything correctly. I have had many students do this and come to me upset that they finished the whole test and they were one bubble up or one bubble down. They only had 1 minute and they didn't have time to change 17 questions or 16 questions. At that point, you just have to hope for the best. So what I suggest is maybe every 5th question, just double checking, okay, I'm working on number 5, I'm bubbling number 5. If not, then you only have 4 or 5 questions to fix and hopefully it won't take you too much time and you will not get all the way to the end and realize that you have to rebubble 60 questions. That would be horrible. All right, so biggest rule here, just work at a steady pace. No sprinting, no crawling. Just find that happy middle, work at a steady pace. All right, my expertise, the math test. All right, math test is broken into 2 sections. The first section is a no calculator section, meaning you got to use your big boy brains, no calculators. You can use your fingers, you can draw, but you cannot use a calculator and you can't ask your friend. So hopefully your mental math is on point. The no calculator section has 17 questions on the PSAT. It has a couple more on the regular SAT. And then on the calculator section, when you actually do get your calculator, you will have 45 minutes for 31 questions. And the types of questions are broken down here by your content. So there's Heart of Algebra, Passport to Advanced Math, Problem Solving, and additional topics. Basically, for the math section, if you have taken the math class Algebra 1, Geometry, and you're currently in Algebra 2 or you've already finished Algebra 2, then you have seen pretty much all of the types of questions and content that you could see. If you have not yet finished Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2, some of the questions as you get further in might be a little more challenging, and practicing with a tutor or practicing with the Sims might be helpful. Within each test, there are both multiple choice and grid-in questions, and I will show you exactly what I mean by grid-in. Multiple choice, multiple guess, we know what those are. And then you have a couple grid-ins. For some students, I suggest doing grid-ins first, because on the grid-ins, you can't necessarily guess on those, and then doing multiple choice. But again, practicing this and figuring out which way you prefer before the actual test would be beneficial. So there are some questions in real world context where like science and social studies things come up, but they're math related. So you're still doing math. It's just about a science topic or social studies topic. All right, so let's break it down a little bit. So the first content that you will see is Heart of Algebra. This is about a third of your test broken up between the two sections. You should see about 16 questions from the fundamental concepts of algebra. These are the things you should have learned in pre-algebra and Algebra 1. Linear equations, linear inequalities, systems of equations, graphing, expressions, lots and lots of word problems. If you're afraid of word problems, we need to start practicing now with word problems, and I will show you how to chunk them so that they're not as scary as they are when you get them on the test. You will also have Passport to Advanced Math. This again is more advanced topics in algebra. This is pretty much the second half of Algebra 1, a little bit of the beginning of Algebra 2 with your quadratic equations and exponents, radicals, radical functions, absolute value, any direct or inverse variation that you have. These will show up for about 14 questions. You have some problem solving and data analysis questions. So there are 16, they call these real world questions. So these are like your ratios, proportions, percents, graphing, probability, all of these. There are about 16 of these questions between the two sections. This you should have gotten in both algebra and pre-algebra. Did a lot with your graphing, graphical representations like your tables and charts and stuff like that. You will have some additional topics like geometry, trigonometry, complex number concepts. This is your geometry trig stuff. It's like your SOHCAHTOA, your sine and cosine, volume. You will have triangles on here and circles on here. So circles are towards the end of geometry. Hopefully you guys finished strong last year. I know there was COVID, but you have to be pretty strong with your triangles and your circles for some of these math questions. There's only 2 on the PSAT. There's maybe 4 on the actual SAT. It's 4% of your test. It's nothing to really panic over. This is a very heavy algebra test. So if you did well in pre-algebra and Algebra 1 and you're doing well in Algebra 2, then 96% of this test should be pretty easy for you. All right, so let's go over a couple of things. Remember when we were talking about pacing? Time is of the essence. Those minutes are precious. We don't want to waste those minutes reading directions. We're going to read them together tonight so that on the real test, we can save ourselves those 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and just get started. So for the PSAT no calculator section, for questions 1 through 15, they want you to solve each problem and choose the best answer from the choices provided. Here's a hint, it's math. There's only one right answer, so it shouldn't be too bad. Fill in the corresponding circle on your answer sheet. For questions 16 through 20, you're gonna solve the problem and enter your answer on the grid on your answer sheet, and we will go over the directions for that. They also are nice enough to stick another direction sheet in your test book before that question starts, before question 16, on how to enter your answers in the grid. Hopefully after tonight and I go over it with you, you won't have to stop and read that either, because they do not give you time to read directions. When they say go, you open your book and then you see the directions. So it's helpful if you've already read them and you know what to do. So first, you cannot use your calculator on the no calculator section. Section 3 at the top, there's even a picture of a calculator with a big X on it so they know you can't use it. They also want you to know that all variables and expressions represent real numbers unless they indicate otherwise. You will have figures on this test that are drawn to scale unless they tell you they're not. and all figures will lie in a plane unless they indicate otherwise. And unless otherwise indicated, the domain of your function will always be all real numbers for x, for which f of x is a real number. All right, so math questions within each multiple choice and grid and group. It tends to go from easy to medium to hard. I don't know why we put torture. It's not torture. Math is never torture. Math is fun. We love math. But yes, for the math section, it does typically go in order from easy to hard. So you're going to want to start with the first question and go in order. You're not going to want to skip around because hypothetically it's getting harder and harder as you go through. And if you're skipping around, you might skip one of the easy questions. All right, calculator section directions. We're going over directions. Let's just go over all of them so that you do not have to read those when you are on the actual test day. So again, for questions 1 through 30, solve the problem. Choose the best and the only correct answer. Fill in the circle on your answer sheet. I know, mind-blowing stuff here. For questions 31 through 38, again, solve the problem. Enter your answer in the grid on the answer sheet. Refer to the directions before question 31 on how to enter your answers in the grid. If you forget, don't forget. You may use any available space in your test book for scratch work. Again, write all over it. Underline, circle, cross out, whatever you have to do to make it make sense for you so that you can get all of the math questions correct. On the fourth section, the last section of your PSAT, you are allowed to use a calculator. We'll go into that. Again, all the variables and expressions are real numbers. The figures on this test are drawn to scale. They lie in a plane, and the domain is all real numbers, same as before. All right, you do get a formula sheet. Yay! However, if you notice, there are a couple formulas missing. There are 4 more formulas that you will definitely need on your PSAT or your actual SAT. The first one being your midpoint formula, the second being your slope, the third is your distance, and the fourth is your quadratic. Actually, we're going to try this. So on your test, when you get it and they say start, the first thing you should do on your formula sheet is immediately write down the additional 4 formulas. Again, that was the slope formula, the distance formula, the midpoint formula. Sorry, I'm trying to write with touchscreen. It's kind of hard. The midpoint formula and the quadratic formula. If you're unsure of these formulas and you do not yet have them memorized, that is something between now and the 14th you should be studying. Those 4 formulas. The rest of these formulas are given to you, and they should already be memorized, but if for some reason you're unsure, they are given to you. They are there on both the SAT and the PSAT. But again, most of these volume special right triangles, these are formulas that you were given in Algebra 2 and Geometry, and hopefully you are familiar with using them. And then again, you're going to want to add those 4 that I wrote on the screen to your formula sheet before you start. I suggest doing it before you start, so while everybody else is wasting 40 seconds reading directions, you're using those same 40 seconds writing down your formulas. That way, when you get in the middle of your test and you need it, it's already written before your brain kind of got mushy into the questions. Okay, so yes, the last section, you can use a calculator. It's the only section that you can use a calculator on, although it is recommended you use one. You don't have to use one. There is actually very little calculation on the test. you could probably get through the section 4 with just a scientific calculator. You are allowed the 4 function, the basic calculators, but I don't recommend those because you are going to be doing squares and square roots. So you probably want to use a scientific calculator. You can use a graphing calculator. Just know that if you're using the graphing calculator and you're not familiar with it, there are a lot of different ways you can mess it up in the middle of the test. And the proctor is not allowed to help you with your calculator. No one's allowed to help you during the test with that. So if you're not comfortable and you haven't been using a graphing calculator regularly for your math classes, don't all of a sudden try and use one on the PSAT or SAT, because you could potentially put it in the wrong mode or get on the wrong screen and not know how to get out. But scientific is probably your best bet. And you can do everything from a scientific calculator. And there's a list here that we've included all of these. The College Board also has it on their website. They update it pretty regularly. I think the last update was August of 2019 on their calculator policy. Just double check your calculator before the day of the test, or have your math teacher double check it if you're not sure. But the TI-30 is really, that's pretty much what I stick with, and that's what I use. Okay, so math strategies. Basically, know your formulas. So area, perimeter, circumference, Pythagorean theorem. You may not necessarily need all your formulas, rather have them than not need them, than not have them and need them. The second thing, do not work out all this math in your head. Even some of the easier things, you're going to want to write it out. You're going to want to draw the pictures. You're going to want to underline and circle. The extra 2 seconds it will take you to draw something out could be the difference between you getting it right and you getting it wrong. So it's worth spending that extra second to write it out and get it right. You are going to want to pay very close attention for conversions. In the math section, they love to change hours to minutes, feet to inches, back and forth. If you're not careful, or you could miss that. You also want to be careful with approximating. Do not always estimate everything. Sometimes the answer choices are not in simplest form. Sometimes you're just doing the basic multiplying and that's your answer. So double check your answer choices before you start rounding or estimating or reducing or anything like that. Again, it's time saving and it might be unnecessary for you to do it anyway. All right, so let's talk about word problems. I know that word problems scare a lot of students. So for the math section, if you chunk your questions rather than just reading top to bottom without stopping and then going, oh, what did I just read? Chunk it, which means that you're going to want to translate these word problems from English into actual math, writing your equation, writing a note, drawing that picture, labeling your diagram, especially when they start throwing a bunch of pictures at you. You're going to want to repeat this with every single chunk of your question or of your word problem. You're going to underline, you're going to circle within that question. So if you're solving something with the formula, write down the formula first, then plug in your numbers. Don't just write it down with the numbers plugged in because you might make a careless error and you don't want to do that. So when you are chunking, first, there's a sequence of numbers. If they tell you that the first number is 4. So this is what you should be writing on your paper. What's here is what you're going to be writing. You're going to write, okay, I know that there's a sequence of numbers. So blank, blank, blank. I know that the first number is 4. This information I'm getting from my word problem. So I'm going to put a 4 in the first spot. Then it tells me, and each number after the first is 1 more than 5 times the preceding number. So I'm going to add that in where I've written it down. 1 more than 5 times the preceding number. The preceding number, the number before, which was our 4. Then I'm going to do this again. That way I can solve each one. And then my question might be, well, what is the third number in this sequence? If I had started all the way at the top within a sequence of numbers, there's no way I would have gotten all the way to the bottom. I would have been lost and I would have had to go back and redo it and chunk it, which kind of wastes time, and I don't want to waste my time. 25 minutes for 17 questions plus checking your work is not a lot of time. So anywhere we can save time, I'm all for it. So now the third number in the sequence, I've circled it here. I can figure out my answer. So I just have to do 1 plus 5 times 21. I have my answer 106, and I'm good. All right. The next thing you need to watch out for is your simplifying. So before you simplify, check the answer choices, because I have seen answer choices like 8/3. I've seen radical denominators. I know that your teachers go over this a ton of times, or you can't have it. That's not simplified form. But on the PSAT and the SAT, sometimes that is the answer. Sometimes your answers will contain pi. So don't hit that pi button on your calculator, get some crazy long decimal, start rounding, and then your answer ends up being off. And I promise you the answer choices will all be within 1. So if you rounded at some point, like step 2, by the time you got to step 4, you might be off by a number or 2, and that could potentially cause you to pick the wrong choice. So you are going to want to check your math, check your calculations, check that you are subtracting using your addition or you're dividing with multiplication. You can use your calculator to check this. If you are using your calculator on every single question in the calculator section, you're going to run out of time. Only use your calculator when it's necessary. Only use your calculator to check your work. Do not use your calculator on ones that do not need calculator steps, because you might punch it in wrong. Make sure that you are answering the actual question. These tests are famous for giving you distractors, trying to confuse you, and you want to make sure that you're actually answering the question that they are giving you. So it's a good idea to circle the actual question or underline the actual question when you're doing it. Now, a lot of kids will get this false sense like they finish the whole question. Ooh, there's my answer on choice B. Yeah, well, PSAT knows that if you add instead of subtract, you'll get that choice, or if you multiply instead of divide, or if you forget the negative. So those will be your other answer choices. So it's very important that you go very carefully through your calculations so that that doesn't happen to you. Check your work. As soon as you've answered a question, reread the entire problem. Maybe use a different method to solve it a second time, or plug in your answer and kind of go backwards. If you get the same answer again, you can put a check next to that question. Maybe if you're running low on time and you're going back to check your work, that might be one that you skip over initially, or just use your calculator to check your arithmetic. All right. What about questions that are too hard? What about questions that are difficult? Maybe you don't know how to do and you're struggling with them. Well, I've got 2 strategies for you that I want you to try. And again, these are just going to be some extra tools for your tool bag. You may not need them, but if you're stuck on a question, this might help you. The first one is your nice numbers. So here's an example of a question. It says, when Judy went shopping, she saw this sign for an incredible sale. T t-shirts for D dollars. If she had P dollars in her pocket, how many t-shirts could she buy if she spent all her money and didn't get any change? Okay, T, D, P, that's a lot of variables and a lot of letters, and that's not how I like to do math personally. I would prefer to use nice numbers, where I'm going to actually plug in some numbers here instead of using all these letters. When I want to plug in numbers, let's say I want to buy 2 shirts for $5. Okay, that sounds a little more reasonable. I have no idea what T and D, I don't know. It's too confusing. So let's say this is my sign now. All right, and I've got $10 in my pocket. All right, now we're talking. Now we're a little more realistic. So I've got $10 in my pocket. I'm trying to buy 2 shirts for $5. That means I could buy 4 shirts. Way easier. I don't have to deal with letters. I don't have to deal with variables, fractions. I have no idea. So how did I get to my 4 shirts? Well, when I plugged in numbers for T, D, and P, I can look at my answer choices and plug those in to see which one gives me my right answer. Well, if I took 5 times 2 and divided by 10, I'd get 1. That's not the right answer. Nope. Let's look at B. If I multiplied 10 times 5 divided by 2, I get 25. Still not the right answer. But let's look at C. If I have $10 and I'm multiplying that by my 2 shirts and I'm dividing it by the $5 they cost, I get $4. Looks like my right answer. Still going to check D just to make sure. But when I multiply 10 times 5 times 2, I get 100, not my answer. So now this question that seemed very difficult and had a bunch of letters instead of numbers, I used my strategy of nice numbers. I plugged in for the t-shirts, the dollars, and the money in my pocket, and I was able to solve this without too much of a headache. All right, the other strategy is called working backwards. So let's say you get this headache of a problem, right? And it says Judy ate 1/2 the jelly beans in the jar and passed the jar to Alan. He ate 1/3 of the remaining jelly beans. He passed the jar to Karen. She ate 3/4 of the remaining jelly beans and passed the jar to Jason. Jason ate the last 6 remaining jelly beans. Okay, how many jelly beans were in the jar at the beginning? Good luck. So for this one, you're going to want to work backwards. That means I am not going to try and figure out all these fractions. I know that one of these 4 choices has to work. So let me start with one of the choices, okay? And I know that the answer choices are all numbers. They are all in order from high to low. If I start with A and it's not correct, then I have to go to B. What if B is not correct? Now I got to go to C. Or vice versa, if I start with D, D is not correct, then I got to go to C. And if C is not going to be correct, then I got to go to B. You're better off starting with B or C, because if C is not correct, it's too small. Guess what? You saved yourself time and didn't have to do D and C. You just did C and knew it didn't work. If C is too big, again, saved yourself a whole lot of time because D would work. So let's start with C, right? We're going to start with C, one in the middle, to see if it works. So here's my problem again, where I started with my 144 jelly beans. That means Judy ate 1/2 the jelly beans in the jar. So we started with 144. She ate 72. 72 remain. She passed it to Alan. He's going to eat 1/3 of them. That means 1/3 of 72 is 24. So now there's 48 remaining. With my 48 remaining jelly beans passed to Karen, if she eats 3/4, that's 36 of them. 12 are remaining. Oh, it says Jason ate the 6 remaining jelly beans, but I have 12 remaining. So 72 or 144 cannot be my answer. It has to be 72. It has to be smaller. So I saved myself the time by not plugging in A and not plugging in B and just skipping right down to C. And then when I realized it was too big, I only had one answer choice left that worked, which was 72. So let's try that. So if I start with 72 and Judy eats 1/2 of them, she's got 36 jelly beans and probably a bellyache. Then she gives them to Alan, and Alan's going to eat 1/3 of them. So he's going to eat 12, probably a smaller tummy ache, but still quite a bit. There are 24 remaining. He gives those to Karen. Karen's got 18 jelly beans and probably no dinner. There are 6 remaining. Oh, look at that. Jason ate the 6 remaining. So we have the correct answer. All right, 2 more quick math tips. If you feel like you are taking forever to solve that easy problem, you probably misread the question. You might have overlooked some kind of shortcut. Maybe leave it, circle it, put a question mark if you're like, this has to be an easy one. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Well, make sure that you come back to it and just keep going. Same thing with the hard ones. If you think you went through a really, really hard one, all of a sudden you're like, wow, that was just A, that was 2 steps. You might have overlooked something. So make sure you didn't fall for a distractor. Reread the question to make sure that you are able to get it. All right. So The other thing in your practicing and studying between now and your test are translating English to math words. If you noticed in there, in our word problems, you will see a lot of is, are, was, some more thans, less thans, a lot of movement ones indicate distance, our per, like 2 beeps per blob. I don't know what a blob is. Those ones we're going to need to divide. So make sure you know when you need to put an equal sign when you're writing out your word problem into a math problem. Make sure you know when it's adding or subtracting or anything like that. The math words are very important. There's other math terminology that you will encounter on this test, like digit, integer, rational number. All of these that are on the screen are math terminology that you should learn in pre-algebra and algebra 1. If any of the stuff that we're going over tonight is super unfamiliar, Khan Academy does a really good job with reviewing it, and our tutors do a really good job going through our math terminology and making flashcards and finding ways to help you figure these out, because getting from a word problem to an actual math problem is the biggest step. That's the first step. Once you're there, a lot of students won't struggle as much, but that's the big step, and that's knowing this math terminology. All right, so before we get started, I just want to go over the grid-in part. When you printed out your PSAT, hopefully you also printed out a bubble sheet and a grid-in sheet. It's always good to practice the way you are going to actually test. So there are 13 questions on this test that have no answer choices, kind of like regular math tests. So at the end of both sections, the no calculator, there's 5, calculator, there's 8. They're not any harder or any different like that. It's just that there's no multiple choice. So you have to put these in a grid-in that looks like this. Now, when you bubble your answers on the grid-in, you have to do both the right in the top and the bubble on the bottom. So if your answer, for example, is 13, then you need to write the 13 up here and completely bubble in the 1 and the 3. If you only bubble, or if you only write your answer in the top, you could potentially lose points and not get credit for this question. So make sure you do both. Your answers will always fit into the 4 columns. If your answer doesn't fit into the 4 columns, then you did something wrong. That means in the 4 columns, your fraction symbol, this guy here should fit, or if you have a decimal, this guy should fit too. If you have something like 27.99, something's wrong because those are not all going to fit. So double check your work. If you want to write from the left side or the right side, it doesn't matter. Just don't put it in the middle, and make sure that you only bubble 1 bubble per column. So again, if your answer was 13, you don't want to put the 1 and the 3 in the same column. And if you get a mixed number, like 2.5, do not bubble 2, then 1, then the slash, then the 2, because it's going to be read like 21 over 2. What you're going to have to do is make it an improper fraction or make it a decimal. That way you do not get it misread by the computer. The other thing you want to think about is when you get a decimal that repeats, you can just put it to the 3 decimal places. So you'll put the dot and then the 666. Ooh, that's a bad number. I don't know why we use that one. Or you can use like a 2 over 3. Either one would be correct. All right, so for the PSAT in this 3rd section, we are going to start our first practice test. So go ahead and turn to page 32 of your downloaded practice PSAT. I'm going to put a timer on here for 25 minutes. I want you to answer just the 17 questions with the 3 on the top of the page, the 3rd section. Use your answer sheet. It should be at the end of the downloaded test if you printed everything. Do not take any breaks. Turn off your music. Put your phone away. Do not use a calculator. Remember to mark up your text, underline, circle, do whatever you have to do. All right, we will be back in 25 minutes to go over these 17 questions. Don't work ahead. Don't work on anything else, just these. If you finish before the time is up, go back and review your work. Good luck. It start? I don't know if it started. I think it started. I don't know how to make the timer start. Okay, maybe I don't have a timer on here. I'm trying. So you guys should have started. Oh well, I'll time it myself, guys. Sorry. I don't know why the timer won't go on here. It's okay. You have 5 minutes remaining. One more minute. All right, guys, pencils down. We are going to go over all of the questions. I know we were supposed to be done at 8, so I will do my best to get through all of the questions in the next 10 minutes. But if you have to duck out early, we do have this recorded. We will post this along with Tuesday's recording when Sheila did the verbal sections. So hopefully you can stick with us. And I am trying my best to respect your time and be done by 8. So let's get started. Number 1 is considered one of the easy questions. A babysitter earns $8 an hour for babysitting 2 children. And an additional $3 tip when both children are put to bed on time. If the babysitter gets the children to bed on time, what expression could be used to determine how much the babysitter gets paid? So for this one, you would have wanted to choose A. It is important that you are underlining. So the real question here is, what's the expression that could be used? If you chose B, C, or D, then you might have either interchanged your variables here, or you got distracted with the number of children here. Let's go on to number 2. For this one's kind of a medium question. You need to rearrange the equation and multiply out the expression on the left. So you are going to want to distribute your 3 right here and multiply it out. And when you do so, you'll get 3x plus 3y equals y. Subtract 3y from both sides. 3x equals negative 2y. When you divide by 3, the correct answer is B. Negative 2/3. All right. Number 3 is also considered a medium question. We are looking at the ordered pair that would satisfy this system of equations. You're going to want to first clear your fractions. To do so, you're going to have to multiply this top all by 4 and this bottom part all by 8. Once you have multiplied everything by these numbers, you will get a new set of equations where you can subtract them side by side. When you do so, you should have 2x minus y for the top, and on the bottom you'll get, you're subtracting, remember, you will get a x minus y. I apologize, my annotating is a little rough. Equals, and the answers, of course, need to be subtracted. So you'll be doing 40 minus 152. If you do not distribute this negative here in the middle to your x and actually changing your sign here to a positive, you will get the wrong answer. So once you distribute, you combine your like terms, you can solve for your x and y, where x equals negative 112 and y equals negative 264. The correct answer to this one was A. Okay. So for these first few questions, you should be able to get through in a little under than a minute each. Now we're going to move into some more challenging questions. They're still considered medium difficulty. However, this one does require a little more on your part as the test taker. So for this one, we have triangle ABC above, that is isosceles. Hopefully we learned our isosceles triangles in geometry, and we know that AB, that's this side here, is going to equal AC, this side here, which means that when we are solving for this equation, we should set up a ratio or a proportion here. They gave us all the way for B to C. They told us that one was 48. And they tell us also that the ratio of DE to DF, so DE right here to DF right here, has a ratio of 5 to 7. Notice how I'm annotating on here. Your test book should look the same. You should be writing on your test questions so that you're able to solve these questions. Now, when you set up a proportion, you should set it up the way they've given you. B to D is proportionate to our DC, and this would be the same as our DE to our DF. Plug in the numbers that you know. That means you're going to have 5x over 7x equals 5 over 7. Because we don't, 5 over 7. Because we don't know what our x is just yet. So we're going to have to do this as a proportion where we're multiplying. And the correct answer here, once we've multiplied, is actually going to be 28. It is D. You can add BD and DC to get BC, or 5x plus 7x equals 48. There's an algebraic way to do it. 12x equals 48, so x is 4. You can plug in your 4. 7 times 4 is 28. Either way, it works. Okay, for number 5, this one's also a medium question. This one we're going to set up a system of equations. So in a certain game, a player can solve easy or hard puzzles. A player earns 30 points for easy. They also earn 60 points for hard. If Tina has a total of 50 puzzles and 1,950 points, then here's my question: how many hard puzzles did she solve? So I'm going to set this up as a system. So I'm going to say 30 easy plus my 60 hard is going to give me my total number of puzzles, which was, or my points, 30 points for easy, 60 points for hard, for a total of 1,950 points. And I know that my total easy points, or easy puzzles plus my hard puzzles together, was a total of 50 puzzles. Once I have set up my system of equations, I can now solve for H. And the correct answer to this one is B. You could always go back and check your work. You can plug in 15 hard puzzles and figure out if you're still able to get 1,950 points, or if you're still able to get 50 puzzles when you add in the rest of the easy ones. For number 6, also a medium one, this one you need the quadratic formula. Remember at the beginning when we were going over formulas and I said, yeah, that's great, they give you a formula sheet, but they've left off some of the important ones. One of those important ones happens to be the quadratic formula. You need the quadratic formula. You can multiply by 2 and rewrite this in terms of 2x if you would like, or you can factor this. So in order to factor 2x squared plus 7x minus 15, you can regroup and you would get 2x squared plus, of course, 10x minus 3x for your regrouping if you are factoring that way, where you have 10x and 3x. And once you have regrouped, you should get that R equals 3 over 2 and S equals -5. Once you have solved for R and S, which of course are the two solutions, we know there's 2. We also know that the R is going to be the bigger one. S is negative, so it's the smaller one here. And then I'm going to subtract them. So I'm subtracting 3 over 2 minus -5. The correct answer is B, 13/2. All right, number 7, to cut a lawn, Alan charges a fee. This one also is a medium question, and his fee is $15. He has a charge of $8.50 per hour. Notice I'm chunking. I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm underlining. I know what I'm going to be looking here, what I'm looking for. So this was all under Alan. Now I have Taylor. Taylor is going to charge a fee of $12 for his equipment and $9.25 an hour. They tell us that X represents the number of hours spent cutting the lawn. And here's my actual question. What are all of the values of X for which Taylor's total charge is greater than Alan's total charge? So we're looking at an inequality. So you're going to want to first start with Alan's, what he charges, and that's 15 plus his $8.50 an hour. And remember, we're using our X because that was what they told us. X represents the number of hours. And we want Taylor to be more than or greater than Alan. So then we would set up Taylor's like this, where we have his $12 charge and his $9.25 per hour. So from here, we can subtract the $8.50 from both sides and subtract 12 from both sides, and you will find that X is greater than 4. The answer is A. For the next question, number 8, this one is considered an easy to medium question. This equation above is the model of a relationship between the number of cups of hot chocolate sold per day at a coffee shop and the daily average temperature. So they tell you the T is temperature. Use any equation they give you. Label any variables they give you. It will make it much easier. So this is our number of cups here. And from here, it says, according to our model, what is the meaning of this 3 in our equation? So our 3 right here is what they're actually asking. So hopefully you didn't solve for anything or you didn't do any of the mathy stuff. And we read this carefully, and we know that the 3 is actually going to indicate 3 more cups of hot chocolate because we're multiplying that 3 through everything. So we can eliminate these ones because it's not 1 more cup. We know it's 3 more cups. And then we are looking over here to see if that means our temperature is increasing or decreasing. And from our equation, we know that it will decrease. That's what the minus sign out front is. So the correct answer is D. Number 9, a truck enters a stretch of road that drops 4 meters in elevation for every 100 meters along the path. So 4 meters down for every 100 meters along the path. Our road is 1,300 meters at an elevation where the truck entered, and the truck is traveling 16 meters per second along the road. My actual question here is, what is the elevation of the road in meters at the point where the truck passes t seconds after entering the road? Okay, so since the elevation drops 4 meters for every 100 meters along the road, we are going to follow it that 16 t meters for the elevation. So I'm going to set this up like 4 out of 100 times my 16 t. to solve for whatever I'm going to get. Now, when I multiply 4 over 100 times 16, you should get 0.64 t. That indicates right there, to me, the answer is going to be B. I also know that my starting elevation was 1300. That didn't really help me with my answer choices because they were all 1300. So I had to do this multiplication in order to figure out what my meters were. For number 10, here we have a function f of x minus 1 equals 2x plus 3. For all the values of x, what is the value of f of negative 3? So for this one, we're actually going to be plugging that negative 3 into our x. So when we're plugging in for f of x of minus 1, it's really going to be our negative 2 minus our 3 minus our 1. And once we plug in, we will get d negative 1. So remember, f of negative 3 is what we are solving for. And we can do this by saying 2x plus 3 is the same as 2. And remember, there's that x minus 1 plus 5 because we distribute our 2. So we get 2x plus 5, or 2 times negative 3 plus 5, which equals negative 1. This one was a medium to hard, as long as we know how to use functions. All right, this next one is actually our first one that would be considered a hard question. And actually for this one, we just have to use a distributive property to expand. So although the PSAT considers this a hard question, if we are familiar with distributing, it's not so bad. So we distribute our S first to our S over T, and then we subtract and we distribute our T to our S over T. And that would leave us with an S squared over T minus our S. So the correct answer here is C. All I did was distribute from here and to here. For number 12, this one is a polynomial. It's a medium to hard question, and it does tell us that in the polynomial defined above that k is a constant and that it is divisible by x. So what exactly is that value of k? We were looking for a negative 3. We would distribute first our 5 to our x and to our negative k. And once we've distributed, we have 3x squared plus 25x plus 30x plus 15 minus 5x plus 5k. And then we could put our 15 minus our 5x plus 5k all together. And we can combine like terms and solve for k. K is negative 3. And for number 13, this one also is marked as a hard question. In the XY plane, if a parabola with the equation here, which is in standard form, passes through the point negative 1, 1, what must be true? So for this one, I just plugged it in. I plugged in my x here. This was one of those questions where you could kind of work backwards or you could plug in an answer choice. So that's what I did here. I put -1 in for these x's, and I put in a 1 for this y over here. And I just solved it, and I got a minus b plus c equals 1, which is answer choice D. Okay. For number 14, what is your value of h if 24 equals h over 10 minus 6? So for this one, you're going to want to add your 6 to both sides so that you have a 30. Oh, this starts our grid in also. So hopefully on your grid ins, you were bubbling correctly and you can double check your work, but add your 6 to both sides so you get 30 equals h over 10. Then you need to multiply both sides by 10 to get rid of this fraction. And when you do so, 30 times 10, the correct answer to this one is 300. And the answer to 12 was A. We'll go back if I need to at the end. But for number 15, this one says, what is the value of A if you are given this equation? So here we're trying to solve for A. So don't forget you have a negative in the middle. If you did not distribute this negative, it might have messed you up. So 2A plus 3 minus 4A plus 8 equals 7. Then you are combining your like terms. That is your A and your A here, and your constant, your 3 and your 8 here. So 2 minus 4 gives you a negative 2A, and 3 plus 8 gives you a positive 11 equals 7, and you are going to subtract 11 from both sides so that negative 2A equals negative 4. Again, I apologize if the annotating is not up to par. And A equals 2 for number 15. 2 more. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. I'm so sorry that I went past 8. I'm trying. I know you guys want to get through all the answers. Okay, number 16 was technically a hard question. There are multiple ways to solve this one. I think algebraically might be the easiest way to do this. Or you could plug in a number, maybe pick, for example, like x equals 2, which is what I did. So I just plugged a 2 in for x to see what I could get for these. And when I solved it that way, and I did 4, and then in here I did 3 times 2 squared over 2 times 2 squared, and it shouldn't matter what number you plugged in. I just picked 2 because it's an easy one to multiply and divide. I got 9. So the correct answer is 9 for this one. Last question. Yay, you guys made it. All right, so for this one, it says if x minus 2 is a factor of x squared minus bx plus b, where b is a constant, what is the value of b? Remember, x minus 2 will divide evenly into this because it is a factor of it. So what I did was I set up kind of a factored version of this where I used x minus 2 and then of course x minus a because I don't know to solve for it. You could have also plugged in a positive 2 for x. You know that one of your zeros or one of your roots for this equation is 2, because when you do x minus 2 equals 0 and you add 2 to both sides, you will find what x equals. And when you know that x equals 2, you can go back and plug it into your equation. If you set it equal to 0, you end up with 4 minus b equals 0. So that means b has to equal 4. All right, so that brings us to the end of the questions. If you would still like to go over more of the questions, maybe more in depth, one-on-one, or you went ahead and did the next section or will do the next section, give us a call. We have experts standing by who would love to help you and go over this. We have a special running, so it's a 2-hour review session. It's $99. You can call in Boca Gardens, Wellington, Coral Springs, and Weston. We are also virtual now. Thank you, COVID. We are awesome at doing the online stuff. We were doing it before COVID. All of our teachers have these laptops, doc cams. It's really easy for us to help you either online or in person. We just need you to let us know you need help. We can do this privately in small groups. We do have Suncoast SAT workshops that run January through March. And again, we do this online virtually for everybody that would like to. If you are interested, we also have a college admissions boot camp in the summertime where we can help you with your applications, how to fit in, how to do better with your writing, help on the Common App. We will go over how to get stellar recommendations and help you through the entire application process from beginning to end. It is never too early to start. Freshmen should start, sophomores can start, juniors. It's never too late if you're a senior right now. I wish you all the best of luck on the PSAT. And thank you so much. I'm going to leave this up on our screen. This has our website at the bottom. It has all of our numbers for all the different locations. And again, all of these recordings will be posted along with Tuesday's recording. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We just really want to talk to you. So, thank you guys so much for hanging tight. I'm sorry that I went over a little bit on the time, but I hope you all have a wonderful evening and do well on your test. Have a good night, guys. Bye. Yes, the videos will be posted. I see somebody wrote that in the chat too. Yes, we are posting everything.